Hi, I'm Sigfús Magnússon from Men&Mice, and I'm going to demonstrate the deployment of Maestro. And it's not going to be a slide-heavy session. It's going to be more like a demo-heavy session. But before we dive into the demo itself, I'm just going to explain just what we're doing. So I made this nice, like a Frankenstein architecture diagram of a company, like a pseudo company. And if you take a look at it, it's like a mid-sized company with some find and care, DNS and DHCP servers. We're also running Microsoft Active Directory with DNS and DHCP. They have a few branches, and they are using the cloud, so they're modernizing, and that's good. But they are also using an Excel spreadsheet for like a tracking of networks and IPs, which is actually not ideal. But a lot of companies are actually in this current situation where they're using a shared Excel sheet for the networks to keep track of them. And obviously, it's good to keep track of the networks somehow, but it's not really good to automate stuff if it's relying on things like Excel, and the business is usually requiring us to modernize and provide an API. So with this environment, and I'm going to demonstrate the deployment, the non-disruptive deployment of Maestro in this environment to gather all this data into Maestro. What we do is that we place a component called Maestro Central on like a domain controller or on a Linux machine in the environment. And then we hook up with the routers on the network. We pour the Excel sheet into Maestro. We connect to Active Directory and pull some information from Active Directory. And then we also, through like a public APIs, reach out to AWS, Azure, pull information about DNS and also about IPs and networks and VPCs and VNets from those sources. In most cases, we do this without putting an agent on any of the boxes. So in a typical scenario, in like Windows-only scenario, you definitely don't need to touch any of the servers. You just put Maestro on the network, connect it to the appropriate services, and you can start to use the tool. With bind and care, you would have to place a small agent on those boxes to ease the communication. So I'm going to just jump into the like a 15-minute deployment of Maestro on this environment. And I have here a Windows machine, and the resolution might not be great, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on this machine here. So I'm just going to install the agents on this machine, Maestro Central and the web UI. And here we just run through the installers and read the license agreement and agree to that. And what's like differentiates Maestro from many of the competitors is that deploying Maestro is non-disruptive. So we are managing really critical services. DNS is pretty critical, and also DHCP. And if you have to move DNS and DHCP from a server to another server, it will be a disruption on the network while you do that. And that is really something that you need to plan really carefully, and that takes months to do. Maestro, on the other hand, doesn't require you to do that. It will just sit on top of what you currently have and give you the agility to migrate services from one platform to another, or just keep things as they are. So now we've done the installation of Maestro on this machine here, which would connect us to all the DNS and DHCP in the domain, so in the Active Directory domain. So now we have visibility into that, and I'm going to show you obviously later on how we connect to that. But I'm going to also dive into a Linux machine here and install a Maestro for this Linux machine. So go here and like this here on controller. So this is how hard it is. So now we've installed the agent also on the bind server. This is not much fun, so let's just move away from this and into the UI itself. So we can just now go into Maestro and just tell Maestro where the DNS is, where the DHCP is, and also put the spreadsheets in and so on. So Yeah, so this is Maestro. This is the UI into Maestro. And we don't have any license keys to begin with. So we need to find my license keys and put them into the product. This is something that I encourage you to, after the demo, to go ahead and try out Maestro. Just go to the Men&Mice.com website and do a free trial. Then you get some demo license keys like I have, which enable the functionality in the product. So here we have the license keys. I've enabled some of the functionality of Maestro, not all of it. So I have DNS, I have IPAM, and also reporting. So if I go now and click on the different segments in Maestro, there's nothing there. So because I haven't pointed Maestro to the DNS and to the DHCP, or also I don't have the spreadsheet, my precious spreadsheet is still in Excel and hasn't been imported into the product. So I'm gonna, since we, when we have like a zone, DNS zone, or a network, or an IP address, it's good to have some metadata associated with these kind of objects. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna define this metadata now. So I'm gonna go into the configuration, custom properties, and for my networks, I want to maintain something called like a VLAN ID. Okay. So for the networks now, we have something. We have a title, a description, and we have a VLAN ID. These are built into Maestro and come with the product. And for the IP addresses also, I have a really basic needs for my IPs. I have something called a type. So just to identify a type, is it a server, is it a printer, is it a workstation? What is actually this particular device? Our customers have tons of these custom properties defined, and with all kinds of behavior on them as well. So not only they might have like a hierarchical custom properties, and also some external like a functionality to validate what has been entered into the fields. Okay, so now we're here now with the we have done some of the work here. I'm going to go into the IPAM and I'm going to install import my Excel sheet. The IPAM module in Maestro does pull information from various places. The first stop is usually an Excel sheet or like maybe an open source IPAM tool. But it's going to pull also information from Active Directory, from the DHCP servers, from the routers, from the cloud. So all this data is going to be entered into the tool, and you would have like then ability to manage it. So here are my subnets. So this is a really nice list of subnets which this company has. And now we are importing the subnets, and we see that it's done. We go back here, and now we see like a structured way of looking at my network. So again, the image I showed in the beginning, where we had the different branches, they are all under the 10/8 and 10/11, and the different networks are here. So we see that the headquarters have this subnet block here, and then the individual branches have their subnet blocks, and they are broken into various smaller subnets. But there is no utilization, because Maestro only knows now what is defined to the network. It hasn't connected to the services that contain the IPs. That's going to come later on. So now, since we have added the DNS, so the controllers on the network, we can go now ahead and add the actual DNS into Maestro. There are no services yet in the tool. So I can go in here now and say, I'm going to add a DHCP server. And I can go in now and just select the DHCP. And these are the DHCP services we currently support. And I'm going to add a micro DHCP. And I'm going to both do IPv4 and IPv6 on this box. What Maestro does now, it will connect to this particular DHCP server. and it will pull all the data into its database. What's also unique about Maestro is that it is like a bidirectional tool. So it will you're good to spell Maestro correctly.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bidirectional tool. So it will what it means is that it will pull the DHCP information from the DHCP servers into Maestro, but you can still go with the snapping tools, the native tools of the service, and change stuff, and we will adapt to this change. So it's an overlay, stays on top, and you can still go use Maestro to create a new scope or to create a DSP reservation or do something, but you can also do it outside of the tool, just on the with using the native tools.
Is that for all services? Because I played with it on a Red Hat basic install with just bind, and I noticed that afterwards it created different directories in the var where it kept the maintenance, and my original named was actually no longer looked at.
Yeah. So for bind, what it does, it will restructure the bind, the name.conf file, and also the directory structure, and it will be slightly it's modified because it's just done to ease how we work with the config files. So because if it's like a one big config file, it's difficult to determine how how to structure like a view or a zone or something. But it still is a name.conf file. It still is a named configuration, but it has been altered restructured in a different way.
And if I would then deinstall it, it would revert back to the old settings, or does it just leave me with that?
It leaves you with that. But what we do with the install on the Red Hat is to take the configuration, and it's backed up. So if you want to try it out and just do some experiments with it, your old configuration is still there with the old name.conf and old the name var named.
I was wondering if which protocol is used to connect to the DHCP or DNS and so on. Is it the usual DNS protocol, or which ports?
Excellent question. So we have different ways. It depends on what kind of service we are managing. So we use the most native way for the service that we are connecting to. So let's say we are connecting to a web, like a cloud service, then we use an API or a web service to connect to that. If we are connecting to a Microsoft DNS, we will use RPC to connect to the native Windows mechanism. But we also use DNS wherever we can to optimize things. So, for example, to keep in sync with the DNS data, we use maybe incremental zone transfers and so on. And with the bind, we have an agent on the bind server, and we will use the native RNDC dynamic updates and these kind of, and also rewriting files on the bind server.
I just had a question about, because you say you can use the native tools and you can use this. So what happens in a conflict situation? Let's say you have a very big organization and you have some junior administrators and they start playing around in the native tools. Can this be declarative in the sense that this will take precedence and immediately correct anything that's done with the native tools?
Actually, as an overlay and a very polite overlay, we will notify if there's a change has been done which collides with Maestro, and we will back out, because usually when companies are deploying, like a large organization is deploying Maestro, what they will do is they will revoke the native access to the, for example, the Microsoft Snap and make changes there. So everything goes eventually through Maestro. But if it is not available, then you could also go to the native tool.
And I see you have RBAC there too. So you have RBAC, so you can control the level of access in Maestro.
Yeah. So I'm going to add another DHCP server to Maestro here, because we have a kind of a long way to go to complete this in my 5 minutes I scheduled for the deployment of Maestro. But that is really good. So we have now two DHCP servers in Maestro. And if I go now back into the IPAM piece, you can see that there are some IP ranges, which I took from the spreadsheet. But now there are DHCP scopes. And we can see that they're in a failover. And we see some, actually, the resolution is quite small, but or actually large. So we don't see all the details, but you can see that the scopes are in a failover between these two DHCP servers. And this is like a typical scenario with customers. We can see that this scope, for example, this class 27 is in a failover. It also is 41% utilized. And if I open it up, you can see the leases, the reservations, the pools, the exclusions, and we can also manage it through Maestro. But we've only done DHCP, and we also have to do DNS. So I'm gonna go here and add a service. And this is gonna be a Microsoft server, Microsoft DNS. And this is gonna be DNS 1. And this is an Active Directory DNS server. And with an Active Directory DNS server, because it's by nature, Active Directory is like a multi-primary system. So we only need to add one into Maestro, and that will take care of distributing the changes to the other servers. So if I go now into DNS and do a refresh here, you can see that these zones are now in Maestro. And if I open it up, we can see that it has synchronized all the DNS data into Maestro. And I can start to play with it here. I can start to manage the DNS data on the Microsoft servers just now. But I'm also gonna, because I had also the bind servers, I'm also gonna add them here. And it's gonna be bind. Everything has a fancy name. And this was my bind server. And I can go now here and just view the zones on this server. And you can see the primary server with all these zones. And now they're all in Maestro. And the largest one here is it's a fairly small one, 2,600 records, but it has been synchronized into our database. Okay, and then we have another one, which is the So we're almost there. We have a good coverage of the environment. So we have both the Microsoft DHCP servers. We also have Active Directory DNS. We have the bind service, and the only thing we have to do now is the KEA server, which is the DHCP server I'm using in my data center. So it has maybe a couple of zones on there. So I think it's called. Okay, so now we've populated Maestro with all this information now, and we are good in a good place now. If I go now to DNS, we can see that we have all the DNS zones here, and they're all in the like a single view of my Microsoft and bind zones, meaning that we don't have to train people on going into using VI or some command line tools to make changes on the Linux side, and then use a snap-in on the Microsoft side, maybe some other tool for the the cloud DNS. We just have a single tool to make all these changes, and then we can use the RBAC to specify what kind of access different people have to different objects. So if I go here, open up the primary zone, I can go and say I need to create a new DNS record, and DDI here, an IP address, and find the next free available IP address in a particular subnet, and then create and save. And now the change has been made on the bind server. It has been notified, and everything has been updated. And if I do the same for on the Windows side, I can just go here and I can delete a record. Delete DNS record. And you can see that we are always prompting the user for a save comment, but we track all the changes done obviously in the system, so you can see who was doing what, when, and why.
Can you enforce the putting in a comment so that you have an
you can do that? Yeah.
Can you actually enforce putting an approval in the middle of that? Because I have a lot of people requesting IPs and subnets that don't need to be there.
Good question. So we that is a part of the workflow, which I'm going to demonstrate in a later video.
Perfect.
On another session.
Just a very simple question, just so to get something straight in my mind. At the beginning, you installed a web service on a Windows box. Is the interface we're looking here that web service, or is this
Yes.
a SaaS-based service?
No, this is the web service, which is on my Windows box. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
So is it as easy to add a domain as it is to just add another name to one of the domains that's already there?
Yeah, that's easy. So if I go here into primary zone and tag field date 27 rules.com, and it's going to be on my primary zone is going to be the bind server, and I'm going to have these two both my Windows server and the Linux server or the other bind server as a secondaries.
Okay, it was excellent. That was going to be my next question: is does it actually set up secondary servers automatically?
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
So now, I mean, everything has been done now. So we have the primary zone here with the delegation records, and it's been created on the Windows side, on the secondary bind side, and also on the primary.
So if you were integrating two environments together, would it pull in and synchronize the records from one system to the other and vice versa?
Yes. So it is. That's a common use case with Maestro for customers. Is like in an M&A that you would deploy Maestro on both environments. You can do it in something like I call an address space, and then you can slowly migrate data between the two to consolidate on like a single platform. And you can also use some migration functionality in the product to migrate data between. So if I, for example, this zone here on the bind side, I can go in here and I can migrate the zone from this server to another one.
Or replication. Does Maestro do its own replication, or in the Microsoft world, does it use the Windows replication?
For the replication, we rely on we try to use as much as of a native functionality as possible. So for the Windows side, for example, we use the Microsoft replication. So we put data on the domain controller, and it will do the replication. But in some cases, we have to connect maybe to all of them to make changes. For example, the DHCP part, they like a DHCP service in failover, they might replicate some stuff over, but not everything.
Okay, and then that Maestro would take care of the rest for DHCP that Microsoft falls short for replication.
Yeah. So I'm gonna, before we conclude here, I'm just gonna add one thing here, which is because in my IPAM we have all these different nice subnets with some utilization. I'm also going to connect to one of my routers to just grab some more information into Maestro. So we have like a more holistic view of the on-prem because we haven't touched the cloud yet. So for that, we go just into here and into the SMP profiles. I add a new profile. What happens now is that I'm going to have Maestro here go and scan the profiles, so it will now connect to the server and just figure out, what this has been defined on the network. And if I go back into the IPAM, we have and just I need to maybe reload here. But this connecting now to the and gathering information from the router, and it will pull in the app data and also all the defined networks on the router, along with the some metadata. So I have a more complete picture of my environment. So let me see here. So I think this kind of concludes my demonstration here. Unless
sorry, about IPAM. I understood that you will get all the IPs, used IPs from a scan from the router. Is there an integration with a DNS management so that the IPs that are used are also the one that are coming from reverse IP or reverse records from the DNS, or is something that is still?
So yeah, so we don't. We support obviously the reverse records, but in our experience, the reverse records are sometimes even worse than the Excel sheets at companies. So they're kind of really much off. So it's not the most reliable source of like IPs. But we do have some in the product some cleanup functionality to like take the forward and reverse and compare them and map them up. Delete the stale reverse records and so on.
Can you easily create a DSP reservation after a device has received an IP address in DHCP?
Yes. So if we do that, I can just go here and I can find one of the networks with some leases. This one here. Find the leased IP address. Just click on this guy here and create the reservation from it. So it will pre-fill the information that is already there. So basically it has a MAC address and also a name. And then I just need to, well, in this case, it didn't have a name. So I just put in a name and then create.
Yeah, but you can't give it a different IP address, can it?
Not this one here, no. But when I was preparing the environment, I did it's really easy to import like a set of reservations. So if you have a list of reservations, we can easily import them. It's going to create the reservations in all the different scopes. But we can also just go and create a reservation, copy out the MAC address and create it in another place.
Okay, but what we often do is wait for client devices to pop up in DSP and then take a separate section of the same range and reserve it for them. And I had some issues with getting that done in just a few clicks. And the other question I had was you're not offering anything like a fixed appliance or Docker containers for deployment?
No, not yet. So we have an appliance offering, which is like just basic DNS DHCP, where we take care of the patching of the bind servers and also the underlying systems. So that might be a good solution for like a mid-sized business if they don't have the Linux expertise but want to run some of this on a Linux machine. But for we haven't provided for like a published containerized version of Maestro.